art, it gives you new eyes. Tolstoy talks about it as rain-washed, clear eyes. That third eye of imagination connects you to yourself and to the world beyond you. And I always think that imagination is about others. It is about discovering strangers, even the stranger within you, and looking at the world through their alternative eyes.
Civitella Ranieri is an American foundation operating in Italy. We welcome approximately 50 fellows a year from some 90 to 100 nations all over the world. Our fellows represent 3 disciplines. Visual arts includes architecture, sculpture, performance, painting, installations. Music, we go from jazz to sound sculpture to new music for composers. And then the third discipline is writing, which spans from playwriting to fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and so on. As of our 25th anniversary, we will have had over 1,000 fellows and directors' guests come through the foundation. This incredible slate of artists have had a big impact on contemporary present-day fellows. It's our legacy. It's an extremely rigorous process to be selected for a fellowship at Civitella. We secure nominations from all over the world, and their applications are reviewed by an international jury. And what we usually seek, first and foremost, is excellence in the work itself, and then this idea of creating a diverse and international population becomes critical as well in the selection.
I found the first sentence of my novel at Civitella. I was getting ready to come to lunch, and the first sentence of my novel kind of came to me. Since then, the novel has started. I'm from Nigeria. I've lived in Nigeria all my life, was schooled in Nigeria, and write in Nigeria, and about Nigeria, mostly. For a serious fiction writer, so someone whose primary source of material is the imagination, it doesn't really matter where you write, because you've spent your entire childhood, your entire life gathering material. I'm beginning to discover, that fiction writers, we're all writing the same thing. It's love, it's death, it's family, but what changes is the way we write it, the voice we write it in, the setting, the part of the world we set it in. And so in essence, I am doing what every other writer before me has done. I'm just doing it in my own way, because I'm a product of Nigeria.
I'm working on a project called 12 Little Spells. It'll culminate in 12 live performances. The spell contains all of the elements, the visuals, the presentation, the sound, the words, the symbols. The other day I was talking about a spell with Azar. Those conversations with Azar have sort of informed the lens through which these spells are being cast, because I learned from her that I share a common struggle, and it gives me more confidence to trust the compass that's in the individual. We're all these sort of star-like combustion engines, that whatever we're fed fuels that illumination. That experience of being an artist is sort of like a constant burn. Anything that you bump into or that bumps into you, is immediately transmitted to that kind of burn.
Because imagination is a branch of knowledge. It connects us to our past. It makes us critically reflect about the present and, in one sense, predict the future. There are very important attributes to being human. One is curiosity, the desire to come out of yourself and discover something new. It's like Alice in Wonderland, running after that white rabbit, and jumping down that hole without knowing what risks she's taking.
One of the joys of being a touring musician is, of course, the people. Extraordinary places have lots of extraordinary places hidden within them. So we just went into the chapel, and there's an old harmonium, I think it is, made in Turin, in a half-broken state. But this thing is beautiful, and the joy of finding these instruments is learning and making friends with them as you go. I'm really a composer-performer, and so I'm developing some material which is actually being recorded for release next month, which is a commission for chamber orchestra.
We're in Umbria. Umbria, it's known to be the green heart of Italy. And this castle was one of the northern outposts of the territory of Perugia. The Ranieri family were nobles from Germany. Civitella Ranieri was destroyed and reconstructed several times. And the actual shape of the castle dates back 1519. One of the Ranieri American cousin, Ursula Corning, asked to spend her summers here, so she started renting the castle in 1967. She invited her friends, and amongst them there were writers, musicians, artists. So in 1994, the foundation was created, and Ursula was still alive. So there have been years when fellows were here and Ursula was here.
I'm standing in the entrance of the castle, Civitella Ranieri, and it's here that we house most of the fellows. Behind me is the family tree of the Ranieri family. You see this wonderful international mingling, a sort of legacy and what we have inherited. For me, one of the most important aspects of the castle is its multiple inscriptions in Latin. In the atrium library, the inscription reads, "I shall not be dominated." And for me, this is a really important message to our artists, many who come to us from countries where there is censorship of their work. The symbol of that fireplace is of a diamond that cannot be consumed by flames, and that the spirit of creativity, the diamond, will go on and outlive us all. We are in the heart of Piero della Francesca country, and Piero's work, this 15th century painter, he is an inspiration to contemporary artists today, and Piero's work evokes this kind of connection between nature and the spirit, between the heavenly and the earthly. But when I think of these works of art that will never leave the small towns where they're made, where they're embedded in walls as frescoes, works of art that you must make the pilgrimage to see them. And I see how long these paintings have lasted in their relevancy, and I see how touched fellows are by this work, and I know that they go back to their studios and create work which will have a much longer lifeline than their own existence.
And as soon as I came here, I was very moved by the actual place itself and also by the history of the place. And so the work behind me is a series of sketches, stories from the history of the castle itself. I also started integrating things that I saw while on this visit. For example, Piero della Francesca's pregnant Madonna. And so all these narratives start somehow finding their way to inside the work. In the series, I started working with the in-between, between the human and the soul, in other words. The figures here are not specific. They are kept in a state of flux. The studio that I'm using used to be an old barn, which was used for drying tobacco. And it's set in the middle of nowhere, cut off from anywhere else. This is exactly at the heart of what the residency is all about, because residency actually gives you this kind of freedom and this kind of peace of mind in order to think things over and in order to work and try things which possibly you haven't tried them out before.
This time of year, there's no doubt trees eat light. The forest exalted, paint spilled to horizons reluctant to indulge highway. Houses scattered like dropped birdseed. Unincorporated, Nyland's pasties.
I'm a firm believer that we are what we eat, and have been very active in transforming the Civitella kitchen through Romana's guidance. She's our head chef, producing and presenting the finest food that we can with a real connection to local tradition. We really believe in making what the Italians call biologico decisions. And even the pasta we serve is made from wheat that's grown in fields just next to the castle, so that we really try to buy locally, support local farmers, and to just give good, clean, honest food to the fellows. It's the evening when conversation happens, the most wonderful exchanges in multiple languages, but sharing what they're doing, which is putting their artwork out there in the world. And I really believe that when governments stop talking to each other, that it's the work of artists, the work of little places like Civitella, that create a forum for international conversation. It's about making the work that will be seen in a far larger arena.
I was born in Beirut in 1984, in the middle of the Civil War. I have an artist name, which is Siska, and it has nothing to do with my original name. Usually from your first name, people would directly tell if you're a Christian or a Muslim. I'm the generation who wanted to break this and be able to live in the West as much as in the East. In the latest film, it's called In the Ruins of Baalbek Studios. Shot on analog, it's kind of like a memorial, like a celebration. Baalbek Studios are this studio that accompanied the golden era of filmmaking in Lebanon. So you have to imagine that Beirut between the 60s and the 70s was the example of Hollywood in the Middle East. And today, this studio is a complete ruin. And all the archive, the film material that was in it, is splattered all over the place. What the state did and what the state is trying to do till today is to completely vanish our history and our cultural history.
My father always told me about our country. He said, this is an ancient country. Iran has been invaded so many times, and the worst kind of invasion that happened to it was when people from within the country came as foreigners and invaded it. I begin my book, Reading Lolita in Tehran, with the images of my students. I decided that I can't teach at the university anymore. I gathered 7 of my female students and created a private class. When they came into the house, they were all uniformly dressed in black and covered head to toe except for the oval of the face. And then they would shed their robes, and all of a sudden, a world of color would burst into being, you know. They all became their individual, unique self. And it was quite a scene to behold. This is real resistance and the power of women. We're not victims. We're filled with power, and they're scared of us. That's why they want to limit us. So for as long as we're human, we need to imagine and we need to think. No government, no power on earth can change that. Art resists tyranny by revealing the truth. And truth is always dangerous, because once you know it, you can't remain silent.